Well, hello, everyone. My name is Alaina G. Levine. I am president of Quantum Success Solutions, and I am also a STEM career expert. I'm a professional speaker, I'm a science writer, I'm a TEDx speaker, and I'm also the author of multiple books, including Networking for Nerds and my newest book, Create Your Unicorn Career. And I am so excited to welcome you to this fantastic fireside chat with somebody who I've admired and known for quite a while, Vint Cerf. I'm going to introduce him formally in just a few moments. But I wanted to just let you know, first of all, this is being recorded and you're all going to get a copy of this recording. You are also going to get a number of resources. In fact, in the resources tab in the webinar, you will see a worksheet set that I've put that's going to help you build your unicorn career, which we're going to get to in just a few moments. So you will have that. And we are also doing a number of different exciting things. We're going to do a contest, and this is going to enable you to get copies of my brand new book, a signed copy of my book, Create Your Unicorn Career, and unicorn stickers. And most importantly, you're going to get a chance to win a free career consultation with me. So the way this is going to work is later today, we're going to put all the details in the chat. Kevin, if you could just post those in the chat for us, we'd appreciate it. Later today, I'm going to do a post on LinkedIn. I invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. You're going to get a way to do that in just a few moments. If you comment on the post and use the hashtag your unicorn career, you can comment anything, maybe what you liked, what you got from Vint from this conversation. You will be entered into a drawing to get 4 copies of my book autographed with your name, and then 4 career consultations. And we'll get to that in a few moments. So you're going to get all the details on that. We are also going to be taking your questions. And so if you want to ask questions of Vint or myself, or the two of us, you can simply put it in the Q&A, and we're going to be monitoring that to take as many questions as we possibly can. You know, Vint, I got to know many, many years ago. I'm going to share with you more about how we connected in a bit, but I wanted to take this time and now formally introduce you to the man, the myth, the brilliant and lovely person, Vint Cerf. Vint Cerf is Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist for Google. He is the co-designer of the TCP/IP protocols and the architecture of the Internet, and thus is often called a father of the Internet. Well, hi, Dad. Glad you're here. He has served in executive positions at ICANN, the Internet Society, MCI, the Corporation for National Research Initiatives, and the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA. A former Stanford professor and former member of the U.S. National Science Board, Vint is also the past president of the Association for Computer Machinery, emeritus chairman of the Marconi Society, and has served in advisory capacities at NIST, the DOE, NSF, U.S. Navy Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and NRO. He earned his bachelor's degree in science in mathematics at Stanford. I have a bachelor's degree in math as well, and a master's and PhD in computer science at UCLA. He is a member of both the U.S. National Academies of Science and Engineering, the Worshipful Company of Information Technologists, and the Worshipful Company of Stationers. Vint, that is so exciting to me because I am really interested about that. I'm going to talk to you about that later. And Vint is a recipient of numerous awards for his work, including the U.S. Presidential Medal of Freedom, the U.S. National Medal of Technology, the Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering, the Prince of Asterius Award, the Japan Prize, the Charles Stark Draper Award, the ACM Turing Award, the Marconi Prize, and Marconi Lifetime Achievement Award. I could go on for 20 years as to how many awards he's won. He's also won the IEEE Medal of Honor and the Franklin Medal. He's a foreign member of the British Royal Society and the Swedish Academy of Engineering, and holds 33 honorary degrees. Vint, welcome. How you doing?
That was very exhausting. Thank you for not the rest of the list. It would take forever.
I feel like I need a little bit of a break now.
Well, there is a phenomenon that all of you should appreciate. You know, once you receive some fairly prestigious awards, everybody else wants to give you an award because it makes their award look better. And so there's this very funny, compounding effect. And so you should just, discount some of this incredibly long list a little bit.
I love it.
It really is quite an amazing phenomenon. But
I love it. It is. But the thing is that all those awards are deserving for the contributions that you've made to society, to technology, and to STEM. And we're here today talking about STEM careers. And I want to just jump right into this. Today, we are talking about what I call your unicorn career. And I define this as a customized, authentic career that brings you joy, meaning, and money because you've got to get paid. And I think about when you build a unicorn career, I think about three components that work all in concert with each other. We're looking at what I call intrinsic data, which comes from our head and our heart. And it's all about who we are, not just as a talented STEM professional, but also as a human. We're looking at extrinsic data, which is about the opportunities which we get from networking, which we're going to talk about. And we're looking for specifically pain points that exist in society, deficits that we can fill with our assets. And then we have the third component, what I call the bridge of marketing, where we communicate our value in a way that the other party understands in the spirit of generosity to help them solve a problem. Now, many years ago, about 10 years ago, you and I met at the Lindau Nobel Laureate meetings, which is the largest aggregation of Nobel laureates in the world. It's a conference that happens every year in Lindau, Germany. You were there representing the Heidelberg Laureate Forum, which is another fantastic conference of math and computer science nerds. I got a chance to see you at that in 2017, interviewed you for an article. And in that article for the Heidelberg Laureate Forum, I was looking at it and I asked you, why are you so successful as a scientist? And you indicated three variables. You said luck, essentially collaboration, and curiosity. And I want to start us off today, Vint, and just ask you, what roles do these play, these particular variables play in building your unicorn career in STEM?
Well, let's start with curiosity. And I have to point out that almost all of the most amazing discoveries have started out because somebody was curious. There's the classic example of this is the scientist who has a theory and decides to execute an experiment to test the theory to see whether the theory predicts the results. And I often draw a picture where the scientist, makes a graph and he puts little, he makes his curve and then he starts doing measurements and he gets little X points and they're all lying all along the curve except this one. Now, there are only two kinds of scientists. There's the one that says, must be measurement error and ignores it. My theory is perfect. The other guy looks at that and he says, that's funny. He's the guy that gets the Nobel Prize.
Boom.
So curiosity is important. And, children are born with curiosity. And I believe that while growing older is inescapable, growing up is not. And as long as you decide not to grow up and retain your childlike curiosity, I think that's really good. I mentioned luck. Let me give you a Lindau story that goes along with that. It was a physics meeting, so it was probably the one that we met at in 2000, maybe 15 or something.
Yeah, I think it was 16.
Or 14, maybe. Well, it was
Yeah.
not very long after the Heidelberg Laureate Forum was created. They decided to start exchanging speakers. And so I was the first one to come from the Heidelberg Laureate Forum to go to Lindau. And that was a physics meeting. So at one point, one of the physicists, Nobel Prize winning physicists, was describing what he had done. And we got to the Q&A period, and one of the students who was there, raises his hand. He says, did you know you were going to get the Nobel Prize when you were doing this experiment? And the physicist looks at him and he says, listen, getting the Nobel Prize is 95% luck and 5% knowing how to do the math.
Boom.
And I thought that was a pretty good summary right there.
I love it. I love it.
And then the third element is cooperation. And here I could not overemphasize the importance of being able to work together with other people. Everything that I have done has been done in a collaborative way. And it usually starts with small groups, like 3, 4, 5 people. And Bob Kahn and I started the internet work together, just 2 of us. Yeah. But that work very quickly expanded to include a lot of other people. And they were persuaded that they wanted to do what we wanted to do. Now, this is an important lesson for people who are looking for good careers. There are probably 4 elements here that are important. The first one is that if you're looking for a career, you should pick something that you know how to do. And second, you should like doing it.
Yes.
Third, you should be able to make a living at it.
Yes.
And those three things are very important. But the fourth thing is learning how to sell your ideas. Now,
Yes.
when I meet with my engineers, and every once in a while they're very dismissive of the sales teams, well, it's kind of the rah-rah group. And my point to them is, listen, if the sales guys are not successful, you're not going to get paid.
Yep.
This puts a completely different light on the importance of sales and marketing.
Yeah.
So being able to sell your ideas so you can get people to participate or engage or support is important. And if you're trying to raise money, let me tell you, if you can't sell your idea, you ain't getting any money.
Yeah. It's interesting about selling because this was also something I wanted to ask you about. And I was in reviewing that article. And by the way, everybody, we're going to send you a copy of this article, this interview that I did with Vint so long ago, because it's so relevant to today. It was actually quite shocking to me how relevant it was. You did talk about selling in that same interview. And, when we talk about scientists, and my background's math and physics too, so many of our community do not like that word, right? It's a dirty word to sell. But you just pointed out, like, if you're going to do something that you like to do, that you're good at, and that will actually pay the bills, if there's money involved, this is a business transaction to get a job. You have to be able to not just sell your ideas for funding, but you have to be able to market and sell your skills, your ability, your chemistry, your communication skills, and all of that suite of expertise to help an employer solve a problem. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you frame selling in the context of pursuing a job, getting a job, and advancing in your career.
Probably the most important thing that you can do in an interview, for example, is not to tell the interviewer what to do or not to tell the company what to do, but show that you understand what the company is trying to do, show that you understand some of the problems that it has to overcome to be successful. You need to show real knowledge in order to be credible. Now, this is straight out of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. George Heilmeyer used to be the director of DARPA when I was there back in the actually mid to late 1970s and early 80s. And there was something that we called the Heilmeyer Catechism, not cataclysm, but catechism. And I'm not sure I will get this in the right order, but George would ask some very pointed questions of people who would come and say, you should fund me to do X for some value of X. So the first question, of course, is, well, what is it that you want to do? What difference would it make if you succeeded? Why now instead of sooner or later?
Yep.
Why you and not somebody else?
Yep.
What's it going to cost and how long will it take to get to first base? And there were probably some other questions tossed in there, but the idea is very similar to trying to decide whether this person is going to help me get to my goal.
Yes.
Do they know what the goal is? Do they understand why it's important? Can they articulate why they're going to help me get there?
Yep.
And this is not about showing off. This is more about showing that you've done your homework. I know something about the company's business and its products and its services and so on.
Yep.
So if you don't do your homework, they're going to be asking themselves, why is this person going to be helpful to the company?
Exactly. I think about job when I coach people, because I'm a career coach as well. When I coach people in building their unicorn career and then also landing jobs, we talk about the idea that, the job search process is not about what you, the job seeker, can get from me, the employer. It's what you can do for me. So you got to talk about yourself in the context of me, using my vocabulary, mentioning my programs, projects, products, whatever it happens to be. And when you do that, it's a sign of respect and it's a sign of you really want to make it clear that your expertise, your intrinsic data can actually solve a problem. That's part of that bridge of marketing that I teach in the book and in my workshops. And it's such an important part of advancing in your career. Now, you said something that really struck me. It was about the idea of like learning what are the problems, what are the needs of the community. And I know so much of that we can get, or not so much, but we can get some of it from reading articles and listening to podcasts and so on and so forth. That's what I call the static research sources. But Really, I find that the best way to get access to that information so that you can customize how you communicate your value to employers and learn what kind of careers would make sense for you is from networking. And I define networking as a act of generosity. It's the most honorable endeavor in which you can engage because it's about what can I do for you, and it's about relationship building that is win-win. It's mutually beneficial where we're helping each other over time. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you view networking and how networking has helped your career, how what advice you would have for people, particularly in the STEM fields, who may be a little reticent about networking. Can you talk a little bit about it, please?
Well, I have not been a practicing networker in the sense of going to parties and having a drink and trying to meet as many people as possible. That's not my style. What I tend to do is to invite people to come and join me in a one-on-one. And then I ask a million questions. And one of the big problems is that I'll often invite somebody to have lunch or dinner, maybe, and then they never get to eat because I ask them questions and they answer them and they don't have time to eat. And I'm always embarrassed about that.
I get that. Yeah.
Asking questions is a sign of great respect,
Yep. It
assuming, of
really is.
course, that there are some good answers that come back. But I have found that showing an interest in what people are doing is a great start. Getting them just to tell you about themselves. How did they get where they are?
Yep.
What was their career? Almost everyone will, a successful person, when they are asked, "Did you plan your career?" When they stop laughing, they explain nobody plans their careers.
Yes.
What you have to be is alert to opportunity. And sometimes opportunity shows up in a terrible way, like your company goes bankrupt. But then you go on, you learned a lesson from that, you go on and you have a successful company. There's one
Yep.
guy who did Waze, which we acquired at Google some time ago, was lecturing to a bunch of entrepreneurs, and he said he had started four other companies before that, and they had failed. But the fifth one he succeeded at and sold it for a substantial sum to Google.
Yep.
So I think that the idea that failure is not fatal is a very important notion. And I find it more apparent, especially in Silicon Valley, that people recognize that this isn't a fatal condition,
Yep.
where some societies are very risk averse. I think many European societies tend to be more risk averse,
Yes.
partly because the laws sometimes penalize people personally. Their personal assets are at risk. The notion of corporation or limited liability and so on doesn't always apply. So being risk averse does not bode well. Being able to take risks and having a framework in which the risk is manageable. Well, think about, I mean, Chapter 11 is not a wonderful thing, but it allows you to recover. Chapter
Yes.
7, of course, it's all over with. Chapter 11 is a painful way of learning a lesson and possibly reorganizing.
Yeah. It's interesting because I know so many venture capitalists, VCs, your acronym for your name, uh, VCs will invest in early stage companies. They invest in the entrepreneurs. They want to see entrepreneurs who have, had missteps, who have had challenges or failures, because they want to see that those individuals, those leaders, learn from those mistakes, not on my time and dime, and they are leveraging this moment, this lesson that they learned from the failure to be even better, sharper, and more successful and more innovative. And failure is such a huge component. We will all fail. Breaking news, everyone. I've failed, Vince failed, we've all failed. We're humans. This will happen. But if we can leverage it, if we can learn from it, it actually makes us sharper, it makes us better, and it allows us to really build a unicorn career that makes sense for us. And I know from my own failures and my own challenges and my own roadblocks, it has helped me to be even better, to be able to serve my clients and my community even better. And Vint, I want to shift it for you for a moment. And by the way, I see questions are coming in. You can continue to put your questions in the Q&A. If you have any concerns, you can put them in the chat. And we're putting a whole bunch of resources in the chat for you. You are welcome to connect with both myself and Vint on LinkedIn. You're going to get that. And in the resources tab in the webinar, you'll be able to download worksheets to help you build your unicorn career and some other resources as well. Vint, you and I, we share a number of things. One of the facts that we share is that we both have a mathematics degree. I love my math degree. It serves me every day. It's literally serving me today. And I wanted to ask you, how has your math background in particular, but extended beyond that to your comp sci background too, how has that helped you to be successful in your unicorn career and as a leader and a communicator?
Probably the most valuable element of my mathematics background is actually goes back to high school. Uh,
Oh,
and that's geometry. And the reason is that you had to disarticulate a problem, find the various pieces, find what the partial proofs are, what the lemmas are, and so on, and then put them all back together again to have a proof, QED. So this kind of analytical thinking is not uncommon in programming as well. Now, just to toss in a current observation, however, the AI bots are starting to do a lot of the programming, so it's called vibe programming. And I'm still not sure what to make of all that. Maybe we'll talk about that more later, but I would say that it's astonishingly efficient. Even experienced programmers are surprised at the speed and quality of the code that comes out. On the other hand, you kind of worry a little bit about how much will we lose about analyzing and organizing um, a problem formulation or a design formulation. You clearly do have to say something sensible in the prompting that leads to the programming output.
yeah,
But I don't have enough experience with this to be to be relevant yet. But I would be interested to hear from programmers who are using these tools and who have experienced the alternative, which is painfully writing everything yourself. I just wonder whether there's any loss of insight and ability to organize and structure. One argument is that there won't be because you have to think that way in order to tell the bot what to do. And so you
yeah,
have to be able to draw maybe a diagram of the different pieces and show how they're going to interact, which I do all the time. If I'm doing a design job, it's get a piece of paper, draw boxes, figure out what the boxes are saying to each other.
yeah,
What do they have inside? What comes out the other side?
yep,
So I don't know whether a bot is prepared to look at one of my little spaghetti diagrams to figure out what's going on. So I do worry a little bit about that. But
yeah.
programming is all about organizing your thinking about how a process is supposed to work. And I find that my experience solving geometry problems contributed to that skill.
Yeah. So it changed the way you think, in other words, not and beyond thinking about math and computer science and AI related problems.
There's a term called computational thinking, which I've seen from time to time. And I think it's intended to reflect how you have to think your way through organizing the program if you're going to try to get a computer to do something predictable.
Yeah.
Of course, today we have large language models that also do things that are not predictable. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes it's, oh my, it made a bunch of references that don't exist, and the judge is not happy with my pleading.
When do you recall? So my favorite class that I took as a mathematics major that changed everything for me. And when I say I use it, my math degree, I'll explain what I mean in a moment, but it was the proofs course. It was if this, then that, if that, then this. It changed the way I see the world. And so as a professional speaker, when I'm delivering speeches, keynotes, workshops, webinars, whatever it happens to be, when I use my math major background in my speech, what I mean is if I tell a joke, because I'm a corporate comedian too, if I tell a joke and the audience doesn't laugh, my proofs brain kicks in and I can think in branching probability streams going ahead. All right, if they don't laugh at this joke, I'll do this. And if they do this, I'll do that. And if this, then that. Do you see that type of, I'm curious to know in college as an undergrad, what your favorite math class was? And do you see like that type of computational thinking? Is that how you approach life as well?
Well, first of all, my favorite class turned out to be calculus. And the reason for that was that the professor was so good that I stopped taking notes.
Oh my gosh.
I just paid attention to his, the arguments that he was making. He drew
Wow.
perfect circles on the board. It was amazing. So the thing that was so impressive about this particular class is that at the end of the class, I had absorbed enough information that if I needed a formula, I could derive the formula from zero. I could draw a little diagram and I could generate the formula I was looking for instead of memorizing them. And so that was pretty dramatic. Now, I did also take a class in logic, but I didn't like it. So the one you like
Really?
is probably a logic class, uh, where you're trying to do proofs. And I did not enjoy that class very much. It was Zermello something or other, logic mumble. But anyway, so that one was not my favorite.
Yeah.
I will say, though, an important thing about kids who are interested in STEM, please do not neglect the arts and the humanities.
Yes. Thank you.
You need to understand history. You need to appreciate art and music. It's part of the culture, and you should not allow yourself to become so narrowly structured and interested that you've lost an opportunity to appreciate the breadth of culture that we live in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please take those courses, especially when you're in college, because you may not have time to read those books. When you get older, you have a career, you have a family, lots of responsibilities. I
Yes.
remember as an undergraduate recognizing that this was the best time in my life when I had almost no responsibilities and I could spend hours reading.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
did.
How do the arts influence you now? Because I know for me, like my background is also performing arts, so I've always been on the stage. That has influenced how I interact with people. It influences how I perform my speeches and even how I do the fireside chat that we're literally doing today. I'm drawing from my improv background and my theater background. How do the arts influence you in your career?
Well, as a young man, I studied cello. I love classical music. Anything after 1850, I'm not interested in. Um,
Modern stuff.
so, so I really do enjoy the classics. I used to use them I would play Wagner, for example, while I was preparing for my math exams as an undergraduate.
Wow.
So the last class that I took in for cello was at UC Berkeley, and Pablo Casals was the teacher. He was a very, very famous cellist. But that was when I was 15 years old. It's
Wow.
1958. And that year I got introduced to computing. Now, your listeners need to understand, or viewers need to understand that 1958 was an early days for computing. So the machine I was introduced to was a tube-based machine. It was this semi-automated ground environment computer, Sage computer. And at the time, I got so fascinated with this whole notion of computing. I mean, like you could create your own little world and it did what you told it to do.
Yeah.
And that was important to understand the difference between what you wanted it to do and what you told it to do. And the difference is called a bug. And you discovered very early how easy it was to create a bug and how hard it was to find it. But I thought at the time, I'm only 15, I thought I had a binary choice, either stick with the cello or go off with the computing. A very stupid conclusion. Now my grandson is playing the cello, and I'm feeling like I need to go back to that. But music has been an important part of my life,
Yeah.
classical music in particular, for many, many years now.
Yeah, agree with that. I used to be in choir in high school and we sang all of the classical masses, and it's something that still touches me and influences me to this day. So I know how important that is. You use the word binary, which I find absolutely fascinating because I actually talk about how in my book I talk about how the future that you have is not binary. It's not one or two directions that you can go with your STEM degree, that the STEM background can serve as a doorway into what I call the multiverse of careers. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about what are some of the, since we're talking about arts, you mentioned selling. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other non-STEM skills that you think are incredibly important that we should be prioritizing if we want to build a unicorn career in STEM? What do we need to be thinking about? And this could be at any career stage.
So before I answer that question, I had written down a note to draw attention to something about when you're interviewing and you're supposed to show knowledge of the company's products and services. There's this scene in a movie called What Women Want, where Bruce Willis is trying to figure out how to organize a campaign for some women's garments and other, what do you call them, cosmetics and things like that. So he tries them out himself. It's an absolutely hilarious scene, but it shows you, I mean, it's a good message, go learn about the products before you propose to put together a campaign to sell them.
Yep.
So the question was, what else do you need to have in your toolkit? I think not being afraid to speak in public, learning to be articulate, developing a rich vocabulary are all really important assets. Learning how to interact with a wide range of different people and backgrounds who have different backgrounds is also very important.
Yeah.
You're going to meet all kinds. An anecdote that I'm fond of telling is to be careful about assumptions because they are often wrong. When I was much younger and I had hair, I was being driven to a hotel to give a speech at a conference, and it was late at night. I'd flown in Palm Springs, and this white-haired driver is taking me to the hotel, and I'm thinking as I'm sitting in the back seat, what a pity it was. This guy looked like he really ought to be, out on the links, and here he is driving a limo at night. And so I was feeling sorry for him. And then we got into conversation. Well, it turned out that he was the retired CFO of one of the largest insurance companies in Chicago. He
Wow.
moved to Palm Springs and got bored playing golf and decided that he would drive a limo 3 days a week because he figured he would meet interesting people because they were the ones that were likely to call for limo service.
Yep.
And so my assumption was dead wrong. And that experience has stuck with me for many, many years now. I make no assumptions, or at least I try not to make any assumptions about people I meet. Instead, I ask questions. And
Yeah.
that turns out to produce much better results.
Yeah. I think that it's a fair assumption and a fair assumption about assumptions. And it reminds me of a time when I was on a plane and it was not in first class, it was regular, whatever, back in the plane. And I'm sitting in the middle seat and this man is sitting next to me. And the flight attendant comes over to him, welcomes him by name. Hello, Mr. X. What can I get for you? And then brings him, he says, can I have some alcohol? And she brings him some free alcohol. And I was just super curious, like, why is this guy who was sitting in steerage with me getting free alcohol? And how do they know his name? And I just said, what's going on here, sir? And he explained to me that he used to work for like Burger King or something like that in South America. And he helped set up like so many different Burger Kings in South America. And then he did so well with this that then he began working for a commercial real estate company, setting up large scale commercial enterprises across the continent. And so he was coming back from a project that he had done there. And it was such a good sort of reminder that every single person has value. And when you ask questions, like you just said, Vint, you get insight into what makes them tick and how they are able to grow. And it also reminds me of a story that we told in my family about my uncle who went to MIT and a PhD at Harvard and a very successful tech entrepreneur. And when the garbage men would come to pick up the garbage, he would run outside and talk to them and ask them, how are you doing this? And how do the trucks on the hydraulics on the truck work? And what are the cans made out of? And how do you organize this? And it wasn't necessarily that my uncle wanted to transition into the trash trade. He just knew the value of talking human to human and asking them about their craft, that it could help them and it could be an act of generosity. And you might even be able to collaborate in some way in the future. So I love that you reminded of us that, Vint. Thank you for that.
Well, one thing I would point out is that a lot of those jobs require a considerable amount of skill in decision making, estimations,
Absolutely.
all kinds of things, figuring out ways around what do I do with this thing that doesn't fit in the truck.
Yeah.
That you should not discount the skill that people
Nope.
have, regardless of the profession that they happen to be in.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
every time I have a plumbing problem, I am impressed by the plumber who shows up with the right tools and the right knowledge to go figure out what to do. My
Yeah.
my usual problem is that if I try to fix something, I go to the hardware store and I bring back what I think I need. Then I have a second trip to go back to get the stuff that I didn't remember, and then the third trip to get the stuff I need to fix what I broke.
Can I add? I would add a fourth step, which is to stop off at the grocery store and get cupcakes because I'm miserable because I can figure out, fan can't figure it out. So there's a fourth step for me. So you bring up problems. I want to shift our conversation a little bit, almost from problems to opportunities, but we're in a unique time in the world, in the history of humanity right now. We're seeing a lot of use of AI. It's exploding in all different corners of our society. And we asked questions. We asked our registrants for this webinar if they had questions for you. And Anita and Daniel had questions relating to AI as it relates to STEM careers. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you see STEM careers and STEM career development shifting in the age of AI. Where are the problems, quote unquote, but where are the opportunities as well?
So I've been watching several people who are in the midst of doing some engineering development work. It involves material science and a lot of physics and so on. They're using Gemini as an assistant to help them either understand the results that they're getting or to plan tests and experiments to get better data about the behavior of the system they're building. And it's been shockingly effective to use this tool. And I spend weekend time using Gemini as a tutor. I've been very curious about how quantum computing actually works. I mean, what the hell's going on when you
Yeah.
run, a quantum qubit, through a bunch of gates? It's not the normal programming that I'm accustomed to. It's not if then else. It really is something else.
Yeah.
So I've been using Gemini as a tutor by asking questions, and I've gotten almost to the point where I think I can sort of understand why it works at all. Of course, the company here at Google has invested heavily in both AI and in quantum computing. So
Yep.
that's one thing. The other thing that I was curious about is how the hell does this AI stuff work? And why does it work? And
Yep.
what does it mean to train a multi-layer neural network? And what is embedding all about? And what is the token that's mapped into a 2000 vector space? What does that mean? What's the meaning of the token and how is that represented? And oh, by the way, the tokenization and the vectorization or embedding changes while you're teaching or while you're in learning mode uh, in the multi-layer neural network and you're adjusting the various parameters, you're also adjusting the mapping of the
Yeah.
tokens into this 2000 or so dimension semantic space. So it's a very complex process, and all kinds of feedback loops have been invented and developed. And I wanted to get to the point, haven't got there yet, where I can do a tiny, tiny little, maybe it's a 3-layer system by hand so that it's small enough that I could do the computations by hand. The reason I want to do that is I want to feel the adjustments happening to either the semantic weights on the tokens or the actual weights in the neurons of the multi-layer neural network. I'm looking for intuition. Now, it may not work, but sometimes when you do it yourself, it's like writing things down, taking notes. Sometimes
Yes.
writing them down helps you remember them. And so I'm
Yep.
hoping that I'll get to the point where I can do this calculation on my own so I can see how things are changing.
Yeah. It's interesting because in the STEM fields, and somebody asked a question about different podcasts. Kate, I think you asked about different podcasts about finding out about STEM jobs. You're going to get all of these notes. You're going to get resources, and anybody here is welcome to email me with questions, and I'm happy to give you some insight. This is my expertise, is STEM career development, and what I'm thinking about is you know, scientists right now are leveraging, so they have their science background, they have their engineering, their math backgrounds and skills. If they're experimentalists, they're doing experiments, but they're using AI in new ways. And do you see AI as a tool, a kit, and also a skill set that is going to go hand in hand with being a scientist. So as I'm getting my PhD, let's say in the life sciences or a PhD in experimental particle physics, I'm also going to be learning how I can use AI to, improve the experiment or improve the data collection or the analysis or some other task in the experimental process. Like, how do you see AI and the sciences sort of connecting to build mechanisms for discovery, but then also to help build flourishing, healthy STEM careers?
Well, first of all, it's been observed by others besides me that the if you let's take programming as a field. Programming isn't going to go away. You need to do something like that to get a computer to do anything. The
Yeah.
question is, how does the program get created? And increasingly, we're seeing large language models being used to produce the software. So it may be that if you're a computer scientist or you're a programmer, you won't be replaced by another programmer. You'll be replaced by another programmer that knows how to use the large language models to be more efficient and effective. So
Yes.
learning how to apply these kinds of systems to the problems that you're dealing with is going to be an important skill because these systems, although they have their hallucinatory moments, increasingly they are more accurate and more reliable. And they certainly do things very, very quickly compared to what it would take to do something manually. And I think that's true across a wide range of disciplines. You want to put together an advertising campaign. You want to figure out how to market something. You want to do an analysis and market segmentation. You want to figure out what's a good test to see what the best kinds of qubits might be. I mean, the range of knowledge that has been ingested into these systems is astonishing. I am surprised repeatedly as I get more and more exposed to these tools. So learning how to make use of them effectively, I think, is going to be an important part of many STEM careers.
Yeah. And I wonder if in grad school, while they're teaching methods for, doing physics research or methods for, building quantum computers or other types of, discovery types of subjects, I wonder if they are also going to, like, literally hand in hand while I'm in a graduate level course in physics, I'm also going to be learning how to use AI to do this. And when I'm in a graduate level course in neuroscience, am I going to be learning AI? Like, is it going to be totally integrated and woven in? I wonder if that's something we're going to see. I
Well,
suspect we probably will, don't you?
I think it's inescapable at the moment.
Yeah,
If the
yeah,
systems continue to grow in their functional capability, which they have been. I mean, the capacity of these systems in the literal sense of the word, in other words, how much computing can you do, but also the capability that these systems bring has been changing rapidly over the course of the last 5 years or so.
yeah,
So it's scary dramatic. It's
yes,
also very exciting.
yeah. So, speaking of drama or the drums, as my family says, I want to ask you about resiliency. So, we are seeing a lot of changes. We're seeing a lot of policy changes. We're seeing a lot of just changes in science that are influencing career development and job getting and job finding. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you see STEM professionals building careers that are resilient to technological or other outside stimuli that could potentially act as disruptors. So, in other words, how can we leverage technological disruption as an asset, as a springboard to innovation, as opposed to being vulnerable to it? Is it go back to that concept of just like the same way you look at failure as something we can learn from?
Well, I'm not suggesting everybody should go out and try to fail. Um, although
What? I just wrote that down, Vint. I thought that was what you were
it,
saying.
it can, that sounds like a t-shirt. Um, I would say that learning to learn and wanting to learn are two very important components of successful careers. A lot of people get to a point in their career, they know how to do this stuff, they're really good at it, and they don't want to change because it's working for them and I just turned the crank. The problem is that the environment is going to change and the business environment will change, the technology that's available will change. And if you don't change with it, then you may find yourself superannuated, to use a 50-cent word. So liking to learn and wanting to learn are two very important things. Let's also talk about the pace of change. For many people, the smartphone is, of course, an indispensable tool. In fact, it's probably too much so. I think when your mobile phone, when your smartphone isn't working, you're going to have a bad day because we're so dependent on that technology now. It's really actually quite hazardous. But nonetheless, that was 2007 when Jobs first released the iPhone. That's not very many years ago. We're talking on the order of 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so within 2 decades, this has become a central component of daily life. Well, imagine that you have a lifetime of, let's say, 80 or 90 years, and you've gone to school and you've graduated. Maybe you graduated when you were, let's be excessive about it, maybe you're 22, even 24 or something. You probably have another at least 50 years of potential work time. Well, if the iPhone can happen in 2007 and look where we are today, think about the other things that are going to happen in the course of a 50-year career.
Yep.
If you're not prepared to learn new stuff, you're going to uh, be potentially out of a job. So
Yep.
learning how to learn is really important.
Yeah.
Continuous learning. I mean, there was the old expression like lifetime learning, and it was all kind of, oh, well, that's just TV.
Yeah.
But it's a really important capability. You have to want to learn, and you have to learn how to learn.
Yep.
Universities are going to have to reparse their product to be more continuously available. There are certificate programs that try to accomplish that. I can't tell you how many people have come to me and said YouTube is saving us, because every time I don't know how to do something, I go to YouTube and say, how do I do X?
Yep.
And there's 17 videos there of people
Yes.
made by people who thought other people might benefit from knowing how to do X for some value of X.
Yeah.
So this incremental learning at need is a really important skill. And it's
Yeah.
one that I think we have to learn how to exercise.
We got a very interesting question from Anita. She wanted to know, what can teachers do to build their AI skills to prepare their own students for their STEM unicorn careers? What role do teachers play, do you think?
Well, this is hard because teachers, especially at the college level, it works better because there's a lot more latitude as to what you teach and how you teach it and everything else. When you're in the elementary to high school range, there are all these lesson plans, and there's the very precise measurements that are being made at eighth grade, or 11th grade or 12th grade or what have you. And there are state standards and things like that that really get in the way of creative teaching. So it's harder, I think, for teachers in that range to take advantage of this kind of new material and new ways of learning and teaching.
Yep.
Nonetheless, my experience using Gemini as a tutor has been very instructive, because it's now starting to ask me questions, which is kind of an interesting
Love it.
experience. I was not expecting that, but after I ask a question and get an answer back, it asks me a question.
Nice.
And so it's now becoming more like a classic tutor. I mean, in England, if you're at Oxford or Cambridge, you ask a student there, what are you reading? That's the normal way. What are you reading? You would go to a tutor. The tutor would say, read these books, and then I'm going to question you. I'm going to ask you to explain what you've read. And that's a little bit like my experience with the tutorial modes. Now, we haven't said anything about agents yet. And that's another big issue, is how you take these large language models, turn them into agents to execute transactions online. If they have access to the same buttons you and I would push on a web page, they can do a lot. And of course, the big question is, what if they didn't do the right thing? So there's a lot of work that has to be done to make these agents accountable for what they've done. So if things go wrong, at least you know where they went wrong and how they went wrong.
Yeah.
So that's a responsible development of agents that should have that property. But I'm
Yeah.
convinced that we will be able to get agents to do things for us that can be done online in the same way you might turn to a graduate student, for example, or a research assistant to get things done.
Yeah. Isabel asked a question about what technical skills would you recommend students acquire for today for increasingly AI integrated systems and society and industry. Peter had also asked a question about what programming language would you recommend people think about learning or honing? Can you talk a little bit about some of those technical skills?
Well, again, using agent, oops, my video just went away. I don't know why that happens, but on Zoom, it
There we
seems
are.
to
You're
disappear.
back. Welcome back, Vint. Welcome back
Yeah.
to the show.
So I think learning how these various large language models behave in terms of either solving problems or extracting information or summarizing things, just learning how those tools work would be a good thing.
Yeah.
In terms of programming, that's a very interesting question right now because there is a drift away from the classic programming to using this vibe programming notion, and that could come out in C++, or it could be Python, or it could be Rust, or it could be any of a number of things. I think the important part about programming is not necessarily the specific language, but learning how you have to think in order to make a program work. And
Yes.
so
Again.
this is back to disarticulating a problem, figuring out how to solve the different pieces and how to put them back together again to solve the general problem.
Yep.
And so learning how to think that way is important. And we will be using a different means of getting the software built using the AI systems than we would have done by writing in PL1, or which is a language probably nobody has ever heard of anymore, or C or C++, or gosh, any number of other languages that have been invented in the meantime. So I think it's good to have had the experience of writing code the hard way, but it also will accelerate your ability to use the large language model and agents to produce software.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was reminded of the languages that I had learned. So when I started as a freshman, I learned Fortran because I was still an astronomy physics major and I was coding to parse through different data sets. Not a fan, not going to lie, not a fan of Fortran. And then because I was a math major, I was required to take a computer science class. And so I wonder if anybody can guess, Vint, you would probably know, what language was I learning in the mid 90s? And here's a clue. They actually taught us this language by giving us binders of paper that we would look at the programming language in class and then we'd have a lab. It was Pascal. That's what I learned was Pascal.
Yes, okay.
So I actually liked Pascal. That made more sense to me than Fortran.
Okay, well, I used Fortran very productively in my early career in the 1960s. Um, but there were other languages like Algol, for example, Algol 60, Algol 68, Valgol, which is the Burroughs version of Algol, all in early days in my career. I very quickly moved away from writing software directly to doing design work, doing architectural work, and then leading other programmers to produce the thing that I was trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
You had to learn to get some satisfaction out of other people successfully writing the software.
Yep. Yeah. I see Janice pointed out that she learned Fortran Basic and COBOL. I know people who learn those. And George mentions that and I'm not familiar with this, he says MCI Mail was written largely in Pascal on VMS. So that's very interesting. So, Vint, we're almost out of time, and I just wanted to remind everybody that if you would like to get a free copy of my book, Create Your Unicorn Career, very simply later today at I believe at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, I will be posting on my LinkedIn something about our conversation today with Vint. And if you comment, you can comment anything you want, and you hashtag it, hashtag your unicorn career, you will be entered into a drawing to win a free copy of an autographed copy of my book, unicorn stickers, because I know that's why you're here, and a free career consultation. I'm going to give 4 of those away, and I will announce the winners on Thursday. And so all all the details of that contest are in the chat. You're also invited to connect with Vint and I on LinkedIn. You can get that information in the chat. And if you want to buy a PDF version or an e-version of my book, we have a special coupon in the chat for you as well. Vint, why are you excited about STEM careers right now in history? Why is this a great time to
Well,
pursue a STEM career?
before I answer that, I have not been trying to pay attention to the chat, but I noticed that George Dobie made a little comment. George was part of the team that did MCI Mail. He was working at Digital Equipment Corporation at the time. It was a great project. I really enjoyed that one. And so thanks to George, nice to see you sort of virtually speaking. Um, I think that the most important thing I can tell you about STEM careers is that after you learn to think in a scientific way, which means you need to be prepared to challenge your own theories, you need to be willing to falsify what you believe, that you can apply that discipline in a wide range of other jobs. And so when I was on the National Science Board, we were studying what happened to people who had graduated with degrees that we think of as being STEM related. We discovered a lot of them ended up in completely different fields, often not even in science, but that they had learned a certain set of disciplines from the STEM exposure, which was applicable to how they thought about their work in a different career path. So this notion of being able to apply STEM thinking to careers that aren't specifically related to science and engineering is actually a very important notion, and it's worth getting that STEM degree
Yeah.
in order, even if you discover you would prefer to do something else, because it will help you think your way through your problems.
Exactly. I couldn't think of a better degree that can serve me as a professional speaker than my mathematics background. And I did physics too, but my degrees in mathematics, I couldn't think of a better degree. Vint, would you say you are in your unicorn career, the customized, authentic career that brings you joy, meaning, and money?
You know, I don't know whether I would argue I'm in a unicorn career. In fact, many people will know that Bob Kahn and I gave away the internet design purposefully. We thought our way through that. We thought our way through it and concluded that we wanted to reduce the friction for adopting the technology. And so we didn't patent it or apply any licensing or anything else. And I'm glad that we didn't. Others, of course, made fortunes building on that. I don't regret that too often. Sometimes I do, but I also believe that if Bob and I had tried to control the technology in the way that's often done with proprietary software, that it might not have been adopted at all. And so I'm glad we did what we did. And I think maybe a lot of other people are as well.
Yep. But the work that you do today, because you have so many different diverse projects, does that bring you joy and meaning and money in a certain
Well,
respect?
the first two for sure, less so on the money side, but that's not what drives me. What drives me is doing something nobody's done before,
Yeah.
walking in a place where it's all unknown territory. That's the place where anything you do is going to have some impact. When young kids come up and they say, "What should I study?" and I tell them astrophysics, and they say, "Well, why is that?" And I said, "Well, 100 years ago, we thought we knew how the universe worked. All we thought was that you just measured the constants, the physics constants more accurately, we'd be able to predict everything." That was 100 years ago. Here it is, 2026, and what do we know? Well, not much. We know about 5% of the universe is normal or antimatter. About 25% is dark matter. We gave it a label. We don't know what it is. We can't even measure it. And then there's 75% or so is dark energy. And we don't know what that is either. All we know is that it's causing the universe to accelerate its expansion.
Yep.
So almost anything you do in astrophysics is likely to get you a Nobel Prize. So why wouldn't you go into that field?
I love that idea. So now I am going to today, my action is to build a time machine, go back in time, get my degree in astrophysics, so that in the future I will get my Nobel Prize in physics. I love this. Vint, this was such an amazing conversation. We've gotten so many comments from people. They really appreciated your candor, your humor, your honesty, your wisdom. Thank you for spending the time with us today. This was magical, and I really appreciate getting to know you even more. And let's make sure that we connect not again in 10 years, but less time to be able to see what we can do to help others build their unicorn career. Thank you so much,
That
Vint.
very much. Thanks so
Pleasure.
much for having me on the show. Bye
Thanks,
bye.
everybody.